All right, so what I wanted to talk about in this little Wednesday deep dive thing is about ways that people sometimes um, sort of like hijack their progress. Uh, Oftentimes, and this is kind of like some discussions been having at home with Hillary a bunch. Like sometimes, like with good intentions, right? They think they're doing the right thing. They think that like they're doing something that's going to get them better, and in fact, it's actually going to it's pushing them in the other direction. Um, so we're going to talk about kind of two different ways that we can think about things. So the first is intra-gym, right? So what we do when we're inside the gym, theoretically right now, but even when we're working out at home or something like that, or if we're, I think especially right now when people are doing some programming for themselves sometimes or things, or looking for workouts online to do, this applies. And then some stuff about like what we do extra gym, right? What do we do outside of the gym that either contributes to or sort of diminishes progress or puts me in a good spot or vice versa. So inside the gym, very quickly, I want to talk a little bit about like when you're doing a workout. Well, we can talk about this. Let's talk about, I'm just going to move a little bit of my notes around. So we're talking about like with a workout, right? Two things to think about, right? The first is just how to pace a workout, right? And I think very often CrossFit has been taught to people as this sort of like you start and you just go as hard as you can until you're done, and that how hard that is may change over the course of the workout, but that doesn't matter as long as you're going hard. And I think there are a few times where that is a valuable thing to do, but I think by and large, if you look at especially like top levels of CrossFit, CrossFit's a pacing game, it's a pacing sport. If you ever watch people in the games, 9 workouts out of 10 maybe they finish the workout and they're just like, yeah, I did it, right? They don't fall on the ground usually, they usually, what makes them so good at what they do is that they know exactly how fast they can be going the whole time so that they can finish, without having to rest or having to kind of like break anything at any point. So I try to recommend people to try to do that if they can. And the best way to do it if you have time to practice are to do work rest round workouts, right? Where we do, a small bit of movement, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that. It could be anywhere like something that's repeatable. So I would say anywhere from like a minute to 10 minutes and then rest for a little while and repeat it a couple of times. And the goal when we do that is to or try our best to keep our splits even. And those kind of workouts give people very good understanding of their gears, right? Understanding of sort of where they need to be in a workout, what a first round should feel like versus a last round. A little more subjectively, I like to think about, and I've been doing it a lot, kind of working out at home, of just the first round as your warm up, right? Now, that doesn't mean you have to not warm up. You can still warm up. But I've done it a couple times here where I'm like, I've been kind of like crunch for, I mean, not like I'm crunch for time, but you get in that weird, like you're so unbusy that time runs out or something like that. So you just start the workout and that first round is kind of slow and you sort of get in the pace and then you pick up the pace as you go after that. And usually the artificiality of having to be a little slower in the beginning will pay dividends by the end, right? Now, there are some workouts where you have to start and just like stomp the gas and go, say like a Grace or something like that. If that's the case, it makes sense to be nice and warm and to push hard. But I would say 80% of the time, most of the stuff you're going to do in a CrossFit workout, you could basically start that first round at about half speed and it will only probably help you. All right. Um, the next thing to think about is when we scale things or think about scaling things. A big phrase I've been like kind of playing around in my head a lot is heavier isn't harder, right? I think there's a sort of tendency to, want to do things, whether it's RX or whether there's just like a pick a weight kind of thing, sort of as heavy as we possibly can and get through a workout. And that certainly doesn't always mean that that's the best way to do it. Even if we can do some workouts, um, RX or the weights, like, it's, I can do that. That's no problem. I think you'd be surprised that if you dropped the weight, the workout would actually feel harder, right? Um, it's like I can do a 5-minute Fran at 95 pounds, or I can do like a 245 Fran at 75, right? Which one feels harder? Hard to say. Or I mean, that might work better if it was like a 7-minute Fran and a 3 or 4 minute Fran, right? Um, when we think about intensity in CrossFit, right, force times distance over time is the like age old thing that people talk about, right? But the big thing in that is time. So in any workout, classic CrossFit, and I think it's been an interesting thing these last couple of weeks where I feel like there's been a lot of these workouts that are like this, these very sort of classic CrossFit workouts where there is nothing to sort of like slow your pace down other than desire. A lot of these workouts you can get through really without ever resting, ever having a point where you're like walking around waiting for your muscles to recover. You're just moving. It's a 20-minute workout and you are moving those entire 20 minutes. That's how CrossFit was originally really designed. I think it was only after the game started and things got heavier and stuff like that, and then people started trying to ape the games, that it became more common to program lots of workouts where there's points where people are kind of like walking around, resting, waiting for their, clean to come back or something like that. There are times where I think that's, that can be a worthwhile thing. But I think, again, like nine times out of 10, the goal is to try to scale your workout so that there's almost no breaks, right? You think about it like you're rolling down a hill and there's nothing getting in your way, right? Every time you stop, that's like a bump on the road, and you're trying not to have any of those bumps. Does that make sense? Any questions about that kind of stuff? Right. One big thing that I've been playing around with, like in the last year, is variable intensity, right? So we talk about, CrossFit, and the textbook definition is uh, constantly varied functional movement performed at high intensity, right? Um, I really think it's constantly varied functional movement performed at variable intensity. I think that is one of the constantly varied parts. Um, so one way to do this, and I've been playing around with this, is like if you want to work out, I think one of the big things that I think people get in a kind of dangerous habit with is the feeling like they need to go to the gym every day during the week, right? Now sometimes that's because it like they want to get better. Sometimes because they're like, hey, it's fun to go to the gym, so I just want to go. Sometimes it's there's 6 days of programming or 5 days of programming, whichever, whatever that may be. And the person, like, it can be hard to be like, well, this is the day I don't want to do. It's like, well, I want to do everything. I think that's totally fine. I think you can do 6 days of CrossFit a week. I think if you do that, it makes sense to basically go like hard day, medium day, easy day, hard day, medium day, easy day, or maybe you do easy and medium hard twice, and then after the last hard one, it's your rest day. Um, what that means is just like, you're still gonna do a Metcon, you're still gonna, still gonna get sweaty, but the goal is not to necessarily like drain every last drop, smash yourself into dust. It's to just kind of like, move consistently, maybe take the weight down a little and like practice something that you haven't done, in a while or something like that, or maybe try a new skill and not worry too much about like what's my score going to be, how, busted up am I going to be at the end or something like that. That's worked really well for me over the last year, being able to stay pretty like fresh, injury free, things like that. And it's something that I like have been trying to kind of fold into the programming, but it's hard because, with people coming different days, it can be really challenging. So I think it has to be something that people kind of do on their own. Does that make sense? Some other ideas, like every day can be a day where you do some movement, right? On your rest days, you may find that moving actually helps. That could mean like OPEX calls it MAP 10. Sometimes people call it Z1, right? It's like very low steady state cardio. So like going on like an hour long walk or a hike or something where you're moving at a very, very chill pace, right? A run probably would be too much, like a jog. Something longer and steadier. I mean, unless you've got like a pretty developed aerobic engine. And then that is the last thing, is doing some aerobic work. I think that's become, for good reasons, kind of like has trended a little bit in CrossFit recently. It was initially something that CrossFit kind of was like, oh, all you have to do is train intensely. And if you train like short and intense, that'll make everything good. And then, especially as Matt Fraser started winning stuff and had done a lot of aerobic work, people started realizing like, oh, you actually, if your aerobic capacity is developed to a greater extent, you have just a higher ceiling before you start kind of hitting that wall of like, respiratory fatigue. So that Z1, that MAP 10 stuff can work towards that. Or it could be a day where you just go on like a 30-minute jog. So maybe a little harder than a pure recovery run, but still something that's going to take you a while. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Anything that you guys have done that like has been a good trick inside the gym, whether it's mindset wise or kind of like strategy wise, or schedule wise, that you feel like has helped, or that you're like not sure about, maybe you want to troubleshoot?
No, I think a lot of times I go to the gym 5-6 days a week, and maybe not intentionally pick a lighter day, but your body eventually tells you, and just kind of accepting that and moving on with it and not being pissed off about it. But I think that's happened to me a lot. And now it's gotten, even when we did that one cycle, I think I became a lot more cognizant of it. So that was helpful.
Oh, and I did the like intensity RX cycle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point, is that like it doesn't even necessarily maybe have to be planned. Like this is my hard day, this is my medium day. But I've done that a lot where like I start a workout and within the first minute or two, I'm like, yeah, I'm just doing this thing. I'm just going to be here for 15 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. And like being able to sort of dissociate yourself from like, well, I really wanted to do well, and just switch that gear pretty quickly and say like, all right, you know what, this is going to be something different. It's going to be a time to work on X, or it's just going to be like, I'm just going to move for 15 minutes. So I think the easiest way to give yourself that permission is to do it beforehand, though. Like
that's definitely
is to like, I mean, not necessarily, even if you don't say you're going to do it, if you have that mindset of like, yeah, once or twice this week, it's fine if I do something that's maybe not all the intensity I could muster. I think lets you make like a good call during a workout where you're like, all right, this one's going to be easy. And I think sometimes it can work the other way too. I think there are times where like I've come into the gym and I've been like, I'm just going to move around. And as I start like doing whatever, I start feeling a little better, and the workout starts and I'm like, wow, I actually feel really good. Or I get halfway through the workout and I'm like, what, I can go faster.
I think also, and Lumos, I think all our coaches do a good job of kind of explaining the stimulus at the beginning, this is a pace, or even afterwards, and telling you went out too fast. I think to your point about RX stuff and what the weight should be, it's a different game. And if you do it, it's just you work so much harder. I mean, there's no better way to take yourself out of a workout than to put on too much weight on the barbell and then have to do reps on it, and that can happen across the board.
I mean, I more and more as I've done this for, now like 10 years, think that RX is kind of just a false construct. I don't think it's helpful, really. I almost don't think it's helpful for anyone. I think like most common RXs for the really competitive people is too easy.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's too hard. And so like, I really think that, in a perfect world, and maybe this, I've talked to the coaches before about maybe doing it this way, is just like never like we're doing, 10 power cleans, like that's it,
I think the one thing is it's like a signaling device, right? Like it gives you a sense. That's like the most, that's kind of what I
Yeah.
like. If you need 135 thrusters, you're like, this is a different workout than 75.
But it could be quantitative. It could say like, 5 thrusters heavy,
Thrusters.
5 thrusters medium heavy, or there could be some other sort of like, there could be some other criteria that we use to,
broken down as like a time target, or you should be able to do a X at this weight in X number of sets, or if fresh, do X number of
sets you can do unbroken. Yeah,
I think that's very true. But I think you can say that, but when the number is there, it starts like people, they hold the two different ideas in their head at the same time. What are we getting there, Andy? Another topo?
Down.
Man. This is like MTV Cribs.
Yeah.
Welcome to the crib, see everybody's house.
But I think you can, the two parts in your head are, I totally get it on one side, and the other part's like, I want to make fun of Robin for having 1:1:25 on the bar.
And a half. But it's also like, all right, 135 pounds on the bar, it should be something you can do 5 thrusters unbroken. And you say like, if maybe the coach hadn't put 135 there and it said something that like, is that number giving you some sort of like false expectation? Like you're like, I can do a 5 at 135. And if somebody had said 10 minutes earlier, hey, what do you think you can do 5 thrusters at? You might have said 125.
Yeah. I think it's right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it almost becomes like, it becomes just a signifier if you've done it long enough. But if your first year, you're like, I'm nowhere close, or I agree. I think it's kind of a foolish number.
It's almost arbitrary.
Right.
And it's not consistent. Like, let's say you go a month.
Hill's talking off camera.
You're hiding behind camera, Hill. Get on camera.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm sort of listening.
Hey.
The thing that I've been thinking a lot about, like RX, is like I know who makes it up sometimes. You know what I mean? So it's like it's sort of like an arbitrary thing that's not this number that's totally consistent, like all across CrossFit across the land. I guess except for some work.
Yeah, I almost think there's like set RX weights for certain movements that are just kind of like accepted, and they're changing, but like 95 on thrusters for a workout where you're supposed to move.
Yeah,
Right,
and
one
thrusters
is like
generally done at like 75, 95, 135 have been the like, there's some things like that. But again, I think, heavy, medium, light would be just as useful,
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it. Let's become that gym.
We could.
We're like, it's like a Montessori school. There are no grades.
That's one of those things. It could make people work harder. Who knows?
Scratch the numbers off all weights.
That's right. It's all experiential.
Totally.
Then outside of the gym, so first we'll talk about like physical rest, right? And the way I like to think about it, or the way that I've kind of, I think has been the most useful, is load capacity and recovery. right? So almost any injury problem is a result of load outstripping capacity, right? I think a lot of times people think that injuries happen for some sort of like, some bolt from the heavens or something crazy or whatever. But almost always it's because you did something, and it can be load over time that outstripped your capacity to buffer it. There we go.
Hey.
Broadcasting from the west wing of the room.
I'm not going to. I'm sure there'll be feedback if I turn my mic
Okay,
on. I'll
yeah.
just talk through your mic. So.
Okay. Right. So, and then if load is less than your capacity, it's rehab, right? If you are doing stuff where the load is like far less than what your capacity is, you're usually doing some sort of like rehab, preventative maintenance. If your capacity is much greater than your load, that is sort of like the road to prevention, right? So the goal is to sort of increase capacity. And the way you do that is by consistent and like progressive exposure, right? So I think it's going to be one of the things that we talk a lot about when we get back to the gym is like, I don't think anybody's going to be kipping for the first week or two. We're gonna start like working people into some of that stuff slowly, because it's a thing that people probably could do it, but their capacity right now is much lower than they're used to. So we need to sort of like build that back up. And it can be something where like, if, in day-to-day life, it's like, oh man, this is hurting. Why is this hurting? I think the thing to always first look at is, what have you been doing? And, kind of like what is your capacity? I think a lot of times people, when they get injured, it's often because they've just started to like do a new movement or something like that. And they sort of throw themselves into that, maybe without the like all of the foundation built that is needed around that. Does that make sense? So, that can be hard to quantify sometimes, like, do I need physical rest? The thing that I think is best has worked well for me is like, if something is still bothering me more than 48 hours, it means something is worth kind of thinking about. And if it's ever over like a 4 out of 10, right? Something can bother you one day. You might finish a workout and be like, oh man, this doesn't feel great, or this is really sore. If like a day or two later, it's still doing that, or if it gets bad, beyond just sort of like kind of bothersome, that's when it might be time to like reevaluate some things. Okay. Some recovery modalities, ways that people recover, and I think people kind of like, this is something that I see people kind of, I guess, they'll get wrong a lot, or, I think leave stuff on the table that they could optimize. I think people tend to prefer passive recovery over active recovery, right? So passive recovery is like getting a massage, or foam rolling is my kind of most hated thing at the gym, or some kinds of stretching, right? Stretching sort of without intention. Anything where you just kind of are like lying somewhere and just kind of flopped into a position, or somebody else is doing something to you, I think is always going to be less useful than active stuff, right? So active recovery modalities are targeted strength work, right? Spending time in challenging positions, and some sorts of stretching, right? And stretching kind of can bridge the gap, right? I think stretching is this weird thing where you can stretch in a passive manner and in a way that's like really not going to do a lot, or there are ways that you can stretch in more active manners, ways that are going to be more fruitful. But in general, I think with everything is like prioritize the active over the passive, prioritize something where it's like, oh, if my shoulder is hurting, I need to figure out kind of like, what is it that I am lacking in this, in my joint or something like that, and what can I do to sort of like make that more hardy versus just like mush around my tissue as a way of making things better. Does that make sense? All right. The last thing, as far as extra gym stuff and stuff I want to talk about today, is mental rest, right? And I think this is something that I've kind of dealt with, and I think it's something that everybody, if they do this long enough, deals with, is sometimes you're just a little burned out from the sort of like, it's not your body really, it's like, it's, your desire in some ways. And I think it's worth every so often asking yourself a couple questions, like, is this fun? Right? What is my why? Right? Like, why am I doing this? What is my like overarching goal here? And then assessing like whether the goals that you have been sort of moving towards are relevant to you anymore. Because I think sometimes those goals can shift and without you really thinking about them. And all of a sudden you kind of like, have this moment where you're like, wow, I thought I really cared about that. And it turns out I don't actually. And I think it's okay to reassess those sometimes and kind of shift gears a little bit. And I think, that changes over time, whether that's like time that you've done CrossFit or as you get older or something like that. I think all of those things can change. So yeah. Anybody have like either a physical rest or mental rest strategy that they sort of like use?
Mine's same as it's kind of for the micro and macro level, and it's recognizing it as well and being like there are times when I'm like, I want to be very focused on getting better at CrossFit, and sometimes I get sick of that. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, but I do know how I feel after I move around, after I see people. So that like, I let that go. And like, I wouldn't say I go like mail it in, but I'm not like, I'll go months without like really getting gay. I feel like that stuff, improvements come in like real big packages. And if it's 2 months or 3 months and nothing's gotten better, that's fine. I think it's changing the mental state. That's how I've been able to look forward to going to Lumos every day. It's like some days there's months where I'm really trying to improve, and other days it's just something I enjoy.
Yeah. I think it's sometimes it's like is building your building wider instead of building it higher, right? I think like we always want to build it higher. It's like, I need to be faster. I need to be able to do more things. I need to have new skills. I need to be able to lift more weight.
Yeah.
But I think there are times where you can also build it wider, which is just like, I need to understand these movements more. I need to feel more comfortable in positions. I need to feel, less shaky when I do something, or like I have just like a better overall understanding of it.
Yeah.
Taylor, were you about to say something and I cut you off?
Just to kind of tack off what Andy had said, there was a switch for me that flipped where it was realizing that I do CrossFit at the end of the day because I like it and I'm doing it for longevity. I'm not doing this to make money. This isn't my livelihood. So that's allowed me to really take each day in a more prescriptive manner and be okay with, hey, you come in, you have these plans and your body has other plans, and being okay with, okay, guess I won't be sending it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then being more strategic to one of your earlier points of how I structure those days, because I just like being at the gym. So if I can and have the time, like I make it a priority to be probably around 6 days a week, but building in one day is just Olympic lifting and technique work, and another is like a active recovery or lower aerobic intensity has helped just keep things a lot fresher.
Yeah. I mean, I think realizing that there's like a million different things you can do and still like be doing CrossFit, like it still counts. But yeah, it's weird. I mean, it is like a bit of like a siren song, like CrossFit can have this ability to kind of like draw you in. You're like, no, I was just gonna take it easy, and I was like, I don't, like I'm not a games athlete, I'm not this, and then the next thing you know, you're like throwing somebody down the ramp during a run, something like that. And you're like, what has happened to me? Why do I all of a sudden I care so much about this? It's not, I for myself, and I think for others, like I do want to acknowledge that it's like it's not like it's an easy thing to just be like, like I'm just here to have a good time. Like there is something about it that like makes you want to, achieve.
Still can frustrate you and excite you.
Yeah, and I think it's also, but like that achievement doesn't happen on a day. It's like you win that day, and it doesn't mean that much. It's like it's like how many of the last 100 have you had a good day or something like that.
Right.
Cool. Hill, you got anything? Yeah,
Can you guys hear me if I talk with my computer muted? It's kind of weird. I'm just gonna put it over there.
Wait, we're listening. We're hearing you through. No? Okay. Now you're both muted.
Here. Okay, I'm on now. I think for me, like definitely taking time, like every couple of months to recenter myself is helpful. And like what you said, Taylor, like what really recenters me is thinking about the longevity of it. Like that's what like got me interested in fitness just in general. And what got me like excited about it was like, I'm in it for like the long haul. Like I'm not just in it for like, the next 3 months or like whatever. It's like, I want to be able to be, the 80-year-old lady who's like riding her bike to the grocery store. Like, so that's why I do stuff like this. Like not for like, to go to the games, as a master's competitor or something. So it's like that for me, it's like, and I can get really worked up. I mean, like when I first started, just ask Noah, like the workouts, it's like, I don't know why I was beating myself up so bad. But there's something fun about it. I think it attracts like certain types of people who like to push themselves to a certain degree. But yeah, I think my strategy is definitely like reminding myself of like, I'm here for like my long-term health. So like, what do I need to do to kind of keep myself moving forward incrementally, like throughout that time or maintaining, so yeah.
Did you do the burpee one today, Hills?
Yeah, it was super fun, actually.
I didn't see your score, though. Hold on, I'm looking now. What'd you come in at? No, you dominated that.
What?
That burpee today?
Oh, yeah. It was, I don't know, it was weird. I think I wanted to hear. What?
Did you start with the sprint, right? You don't get the first minute. Yeah.
The first run I ran hard, and I was in like 11 or 12 seconds.
Yeah, and then you crushed out like 20.
15, 13, 12, 10.
Oh, so you never got but you never got to the fourth minute. 15.
Yeah, I just did 3 runs. I made it in under the last one.
Yeah.
I did 10 with like 10 seconds to spare. So I think I want to program that same thing again at 75 next week. And then maybe after that.
And we'll be at 600 by the end of the course.
And then keep going?
Yeah, we're just going to keep it on, keep on keeping on.
Good linear